Hello and welcome back. In this section, we're going to show you how to use Apply Image for luminosity blending. Now, Apply Image is one of my favorite techniques in Photoshop. Basically, what Apply Image does is it takes a snapshot of your image and it places that on a layer or a layer mask. And if it's on a layer, it'll just look regular, just like on a layer. And if it's on a layer mask, it's going to control the visibility of that layer. So let's go ahead and jump into Photoshop. We'll show you how it's done, some simple examples, and then we'll actually edit an image using luminosity blending and Apply Image. So here in Photoshop, let's go ahead and open up our images. We're in our sample images, chapter 2, section 2. Let's open up applyimage.jpg, hit open here. There we go. And I'm going to hit F for full screen. So the idea with Apply Image is it will actually take your image and apply that onto a new layer. So let's go ahead and show you how to do that. So we're going to create a new layer. I'm going to go to Image and down to Apply Image. Now we do have some options here, but for now we're just going to ignore those options. I'll show you how to actually use the tool, then we'll get back to the options. So let's hit OK there. And you can see what it does is, in fact, on my new layer, it applies the image that we see. So, before it was just the background. So it's basically just applying the background onto my new layer. So I can use my move tool, for instance. There we go. And I can move this around. And basically we just have a copy this time of our background. So that's the idea behind Apply Image. It takes a snapshot of whatever it sees and then puts that onto a new layer. Now let's do just a little bit of editing and use Apply Image again to show how it can work with a snapshot of the image itself. So what we're going to do, let's just create a curves adjustment layer. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom in to our subject's eyes. We're going to make our curves adjustment layer just a little bit brighter here. Let's hit Control or Command I to invert our layer mask. There we are. And now I'm just going to paint white right here under, there we go, our subject's eyes, just in this area. Not too bright, but enough to where we can actually notice. All right, just kind of doing a little bit of lightening in the eyes. There you go. So you can see a little bit of lightening. And then let's create one more layer, and I'm going to hit J for our spot healing brush tool. So you can go to your spot healing brush tool, and here we're just going to do like a little bit of cleanup here. Maybe remove some flyaway hairs, some little threads there, things like that. Basically, I just want to do a little bit of retouching here so you can kind of get an idea of how Apply Image actually works. There we go. Just take care of little things. All right. Just quick little retouching examples. All right, and then we'll tone down that little guy in the eye there. All right. Well, there we go. We're looking pretty good. Just a tiny bit more. Okay, this isn't necessarily a retouching tutorial, but I just want to make sure we can actually see the before and after. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn these layers off. Okay, so this layer here did a little bit of retouching on that. Okay, and this layer here, we did a little bit of a curves adjustment on our subject size. So both of them off and then back on. Relatively subtle changes, but you can see that we've changed. So now let's say we want to, do a liquefy adjustment. Liquefy is where you can like push and pull pixels around on an image. So it can be helpful for portraits. Maybe, you want to move someone's hair or something like that. So let's say we want to do a liquefy filter. We're going to create a new layer, and I'm going to go to Filter and down to Liquefy. But here what it's saying is you can't use Liquefy because the selected area is empty. Basically what it's saying is you can't do Liquefy on a blank layer. Of course, you could go back to your background and do Liquefy on your background, but the issue there is that you may change something and then you have these other layers above it. Like if I were to, for instance, like move my background a little bit, okay, you're going to see, oh, above it, these are my changes, and they might not line up with what you're doing. So instead of trying to change my background, which you don't want to do, right, because it's like the reverse. Like what if you wanted to put it over here? Then you'd have to redo all your retouching, right? So this is one of the great uses of apply image. So we're going to go to our layer on the very top here, okay, and then use apply image. So we go to image and down to apply image. Our settings, we're going to choose merged as our layer. So basically it's just going to take everything that it sees, okay? So it's going to merge this layer 1 and the curves and the 0, and it's going to put that onto a new layer. So my layer is going to be merged. There we go. And the blending mode, let's just choose a normal blending mode. It's just going to pop it on there just normally. And hit OK. So that's the idea with apply image. Now, see if I move this around, this actually includes all of the changes underneath it. So these layers are still there. I can still get back to my original image if I want. Okay, but now I have a new layer on top that's basically just like all of the layers underneath it combined into one layer. So now what I could do is go to filter and down to liquify. Okay, and I'll be able to do liquify on this layer. And let's say I just want to, like, you know, even out the like little creases and stuff like that in our subject's scarf. Okay, or clothing. So there we go. I was able to apply liquify, and now this has all the changes underneath it. So that's the whole idea behind apply image. It just takes what you see and puts it on a new layer. Now, the other thing you can do with apply image is you can use apply image on a layer mask. And this is really interesting because when you use apply image on a layer mask, it just does the same thing. Okay, it just sticks your image onto the layer mask. But because it's on the layer mask, it will control the visibility of your layer. So let's go ahead and show you a quick example here. We're just going to create a new layer. There we are. Let's create a new layer, and I'm just going to grab my marquee tool. There we go. And let's hit B for the brush tool. I'm just going to choose a nice color so we can see here. There we go. And we'll just fill it with this color here. All right. So just painting red on a new layer. And there we go. And let's hit Control or Command D to deselect. So this is just a regular layer. I can use my move tool here. I can move this around. All it is right now is just red on a new layer. So before we get into the apply image on a layer mask, let's just kind of show you a little bit of a refresher on how layer masks work. What we're going to do, we have our regular layer here, just this layer 3 with this red. We're going to click on our layer mask icon. So you can see now we have a layer and a layer mask. Now, what a layer mask does is controls the visibility of a layer. So right now you can see my layer mask is white. Okay, it's 100% white layer mask. That means it's going to be 100% visible. Let's go ahead and take our brush tool. I'm going to hit B for the brush tool, and we're going to paint with black. Okay, so I'm going to paint with black on my layer mask. Notice how my layer mask has a little selection right around it. You can see these little lines right around my layer mask. That means my layer mask is selected. So if I paint black on my layer mask, there we go, it's going to hide my layer wherever I paint black. You can see I can just keep going with that, and it's going to continue to hide that layer. And you can see the layer mask itself now has some black on it. I'm just going to go to my settings here. We're going to go down to panel options, and we're going to choose a large thumbnail there, just so you can see a little bit better. Okay, so you can see here's the layer and the layer mask, and it's got some black on it. When I paint black, it just hides it. Now let's go ahead back to white. I'll paint white on my layer mask, and it makes that layer visible. Okay, so painting white over here is just simply making it visible. And again, I'm on the layer mask. Let's go ahead and hit Shift Delete, which is the keyboard shortcut for my fill dialog, and I'm going to say fill with white. So let's hit OK. You can see it fills my entire layer mask with white, and now my layer is completely visible. I can hit Shift Delete, and I can say fill it entirely with black, and it's going to be completely invisible. So that's the whole idea behind a layer mask. A layer mask just controls the visibility, and white means visible, black means invisible. And then, for instance, if we have like gray, let's see what gray looks like on our layer mask. Okay, gray would just be like, you know, if it's 50% gray, then it would be 50% visible. Okay, so that's the whole idea. here's where apply image comes in. We can actually take the image itself and apply that to the layer mask also. And the cool thing there is that the image will define the visibility of the layer. So let's go ahead and show you how to do it. Now, we're going to start off, I'm on my layer mask, so I'm going to hit Shift Delete. Let's just fill this with black. Okay, so it's going to fill my entire layer mask with black, making this red layer invisible. Okay, so still clicked on my layer mask. What we're going to do is go to Image and down to Apply Image. And we're going to choose our layer. Let's go ahead and choose our layer. You can choose Merged, which is just literally, it's just everything you see. So it just takes a snapshot of what you see, and it puts that on a layer or layer mask. Or you can choose your individual layers. And this layer here, layer 2, where I did the liquefy, let's just choose layer 2. So what it's going to do is it's going to take layer 2 and just apply that to my layer mask. Okay, and the blending mode is going to be normal. So let's hit OK there. All right. So now what it's done, and you can see my layer mask basically just looks like layer 2, right? And what it does is control the visibility of this layer. Now, it happens to look like it's blending really well with the image. And the reason is because layer 2, which is my image, is now defining the visibility of this red rectangle. Okay? Now, I can still click on my layer mask and paint white, for instance. Like if I just paint white on my layer mask, like it's just still that same rectangle, right? Or I can paint black and it's going to be invisible. Okay? It's still that same red rectangle. But the deal is, instead of me just painting white or black, I'm using Apply Image to put the image itself on a layer mask, which controls visibility. So let's go ahead and do it one more time. We'll go to Image, down to Apply Image. There we go. We're going to choose layer 2. Looks good. Blending mode is going to be normal, and let's hit OK. All right. So now, if I use my Move tool, I'm going to just move this layer around. You can see that I'm just moving the layer around and the layer mask is moving with it. Okay, so you can see there. And the reason why you can see our subject's face, but like not really the clothing down there, is because the subject's face is light. So let's go ahead and let's just move that back into place. I'm going to hold Alt or Option and click on the layer mask. So let's hold Alt or Option and click right there. And now you can see this is exactly what the layer mask is. So remember earlier, I was just painting like painting white or painting black. This is basically the same idea, painting white and black, but it's just super accurate now. Okay, it's much more accurate than just painting black with a brush tool. But the concept is the same. Light areas are going to be visible and dark areas will be invisible. So right now we can see our subject's face is relatively light, so it's going to be visible, and all this area around our subject, the clothing in the background, is dark, so it's not going to be as visible. All right, and when I just click right back on my layer, we can see, in fact, that's true. Our subject's face is colored red because there's a red rectangle, and it's visible because our layer mask is saying be visible in the lighter areas. And it's saying don't be visible in the darker areas, and you can see it's in fact not visible. So that's the whole idea behind Apply Image. It takes a snapshot of your image and it puts that on a layer or on a layer mask. So now that we kind of get the concept behind how Apply Image works, let's go ahead and use this on our image to edit it a little bit and get some more detail from this photograph. So we don't need this red layer anymore. I just kind of put that on there to kind of show you how it works. So let's hit the delete button. Now, one thing that I would like to do is brighten up my subject's clothing. It's just a little bit dark. So let's go ahead and grab an adjustment layer. We're going to go to Layer, down to New Adjustment Layer, and over to Curves. There we go. And we're going to just make this a little bit brighter. Okay, looking good. Now let's go ahead and close this down. So here's where luminosity blending comes in, right? Because this tutorial is on luminosity blending. We just made our entire image brighter. Let's make this visible and invisible there. So you can see it's making our subject's face and our subject's clothing, it's making them both brighter. Now, with luminosity blending, you can decide, do you want this to be visible in the lighter areas or in the darker areas. So let's go ahead and apply our image onto this layer mask and show you how that works. So clicking on the layer mask here, we'll go to Image and down to Apply Image. And in this case, I'm going to just apply layer 2. So we'll just apply layer 2 and we'll have that set to normal. And we'll hit OK. So just like we saw with the red square, we have a curves adjustment layer. If you double click right there, you can see this is where we control the brightness of my curves adjustment layer. And now this layer mask is basically saying just be visible in the lighter areas. And you can see, in fact, that's what's happening on my image. Now, if I click on my layer mask and invert it, it's just going to be visible in the darker areas. So let's hit Control or Command I, and now we see, if I turn this off and on, that this layer is not visible in the lighter areas. You can see, for instance, like the lights in our subject's eyes, okay, and the highlights in her skin. This layer is not visible in those areas now. It's just visible in the darker areas. I can always invert this again by hitting Control or Command I. So now it's visible in the lighter areas. Control or Command I again. Now it's visible in the darker areas. Well, keep in mind this is just a regular layer mask, okay? You can just paint on your layer mask using your brush tool at any time. Again, light colors make it visible, dark colors invisible. So if I want this, like this looks pretty good for her clothing, but I want it to be totally gone over her face. So I'm just going to hit B for the brush tool and then just paint black over top of my whole subject's face. Again, because it's just a regular layer mask, right? So like you can change this layer mask at any point in time. Like you could save this image out and 10 years down the line you could come back to this PSD that you saved and then change the layer mask. Okay? Any point in time, layer masks can be changed. Okay, so there we go. So now this is just visible in the darker areas. You can see it's making our subject's clothing a little bit lighter. Let's go ahead and double click here. Maybe we won't make it as bright. There we go. That looks pretty good. So let's say we want to take this a step further. I want now to edit just the lighter areas of my subject's clothing. So let's make another curves adjustment layer. There we go. We'll just make this a bit brighter. It's going to be visible on our entire image first, but then we'll just apply image. So we'll go to Image and down to Apply Image. There we go. And we're going to choose Layer 2 in this case. And I'm going to apply this on our layer mask. So let's hit OK there. Now let's take a look at our layer mask. So I'll hold Alt or Option and click there on the layer mask. And here what we see, we do see that it's visible in the lighter areas, but I actually want to edit this just a little bit. In other words, I want the light colors of our subject's wardrobe to be a little bit brighter, okay, on my layer mask. Not necessarily the layer, but on the mask. And then, because I want to edit just the layer mask itself, I don't necessarily want this to be visible on our subject's face, okay, just her clothing. So what we're going to do is use levels on the layer mask itself. Remember, layer masks can be changed and edited just like a layer, okay? You can paint on them, you can use adjustments on them, you can make selections on them, you can move them around. In this case, I just want to make the lights of the clothing a little bit lighter, and that's going to make this curves adjustment layer more visible. Again, the whole idea, lights are visible, darks are invisible. So let's hit Control or Command L for our levels. And this is going to be on the layer mask. I'm going to make my lights just a little bit lighter. There we go. And now I'm going to pull our midtones and make those a little bit darker. So what I'm doing is I want to pull out those really, like, the clothing has all these like really nice highlights in it. And that actually looks really good. See, you can now really see those highlights in the clothing. So let's hit OK there. All right, now let's go ahead and hold Alt or Option and click on that layer mask again and see what this looks like. So turning this off and on, can you see how, just ignore her face for just a second. But can you see how now it's just picking up those highlights and making them brighter? And I can even double click here and make them even brighter. All right, which gives the clothes this really nice kind of like shine effect. So basically, the layer mask, let's hold Alt or Option again and click on the layer mask. The layer mask is making the lighter areas visible, like here, these shiny areas on our subject's clothing, and then her face, and the darker areas invisible. So now what I want to do is just paint black right over my subject's face, because again, I don't want or need this to affect my subject's face. Just kind of working on her clothing at the moment. All right, so just taking black and painting right over our subject's face on the layer mask. So what I've basically done with our subject's clothing is I've lightened it up with one curves adjustment layer, and then I've enhanced the highlights with another curves adjustment layer. And we're using Apply Image to control the visibility on the layer masks. So let's go ahead and turn those layers off and then back on. So this is the layer we used for the darks, remember? Like brightening up the darks. And then this layer we've just chosen just the highlights and we're brightening those up. Now I can actually paint black here. For instance, like this area right up here at the top is just a little bit too bright for me. So I'm just going to paint black on this layer mask with like a 10% flow and a super large soft edge brush. Just on this layer mask, and that's just going to make the shine area like a little bit less visible there. All right, there we go, and that's looking really, really nice. So that's basically the idea. Just make sure I paint all on her face because I don't want that to be visible. That's basically the idea of using Apply Image on a layer mask, is we can just take a snapshot of the image, pop it on the layer mask, and that's going to control visibility. So let's just do a little bit more. We may be going to bring out a little bit more like highlights in our subject's face. Let's create a new layer here. Oh, sorry, we want to use a curves adjustment layer. So let's grab a curves adjustment layer. Okay, we'll just make this a little bit brighter. Now, I know already that I only want this to be visible in my subject's face. So what I'm going to do is just invert my layer mask. It's white now. I'm going to hit Control or Command I to make it black. That just makes it invisible. Now, let's go ahead and just paint white right over our subject's face. Okay, so you can see this curves adjustment layer now is basically just visible on our subject's face. So now, because it's just kind of like 100% visible, like right there, I want this to only be visible in the highlights of my subject's face. Kind of what we just did with the clothing, I want to do with her face. So we're going to click on our layer mask. We'll go to Image and down to Apply Image. And we're going to take the layer 2 again. Now you could use layer 2 here, you could use merge, you could even use your background layer, but we're going to choose layer 2. And this time, we're going to blend this with the layer mask. I'm going to use a multiply blend mode. And a multiply blend mode just darkens. That's the idea. Multiply just darkens things down. So remember earlier what I had was just a black layer mask and I just painted white right here. Now it's going to take the image and it's going to darken down that white area, but it's only going to darken down the darks from the image because, again, it's just applying that image over top of my layer mask. So let's go ahead and hit OK, and I'll hold Alt or Option and look at our layer mask. So this is now what the layer mask looks like for that layer. Again, because it was just black, and then I painted white over here, and then I multiplied the image onto it. So I darkened down the darker places from the image. So let's do that one more time, okay? We'll click on our layer mask. We'll go to Image, down to Apply Image. Same settings, really. we're going to use layer 2, we're going to use multiply, and hit OK. So if I click on this little preview off and on, take a look at my subject's face when I click this preview off and on, and then take a look at my layer mask too. So let's turn this preview on and back off, on and back off. And you'll see that my layer mask gets a little bit darker, and the effect on my subject's face gets a little bit less visible. So no preview, preview, no preview, preview. Let's hit OK there. So now we can just turn this layer off and on, and we can see we've in fact lightened up my subject's face, but I'm only lightening the lighter areas of the subject's face. And let's take a look at our layer mask. Alt or Option, click on that layer mask, and we can see in fact just the lighter areas are being lightened. So that's the whole idea behind Apply Image. It basically just takes a snapshot of your image and it puts it on your layer, and we use that here when we use the liquify tool, for instance. Or it can put it on a layer mask, and that's going to control the visibility of your layer. So if you want a layer to be visible just in the light areas or just in the dark areas, you can use Apply Image to make that happen. Now, as we continue through this tutorial, we're going to show you more great examples using Apply Image. So by the end, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I know exactly how to use that. I'm an Apply Image pro. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next section. Bye, everyone.